We're with Kari Uselman today, and she's the owner of Wellness Essentials. And she does what I would call alternative healing and wellness. So I'd like you to describe in kind of a nutshell what it is you actually do, Kari.
I am a holistic wellness practitioner, and people come to me for all sorts of reasons, but the bottom line in what I do is help them return to wholeness, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually.
Now, I'm sure a lot of people have a doctor. You're not a
Yes,
doctor, but you're a PhD.
yes.
What do you have a PhD in? And
My PhD is in education, and I have a minor, several minors actually, in learning disabilities, gerontology, and wellness, and a
now,
plethora of other courses. I mean, I take classes all the time. Yeah.
so you have worked with quite a few individuals so far. How many would you say you've worked with?
I've worked with over 1,000 people, I'm sure, in my practice since '07.
Okay, since '07. That's
hmm
you've got quite a bit of experience then.
I, compared to some, yes.
So what first
Yeah.
got you interested in these sort of what I'll call alternative modalities? How did you get started?
I think I was always interested in something more that was present. And the piece that really got me going was when I was in graduate school in Tallahassee, and I went to an alternative wellness fair with one of my really good girlfriends, and my back had been nagging. And a Reiki practitioner put their hands on my back for less than 5 minutes, and I had no back pain for the next 6 months. It was remarkable. And I told myself, I'm going to learn how to do that someday. And so I did. And that was the beginning of my journey into this field. Yeah.
So you studied Reiki.
I have. I'm a Reiki master teacher. I used to teach it. Uh-huh.
I don't know much about Reiki. How does that actually work?
Um, Reiki is, in essence, channeling of universal life force energy. It flows through you, through your hands. I feel it flows through your heart, your eyes, and it helps bring balance to the person that you're working on by by allowing the flow of that universal life force energy through you into them. And I've seen pretty amazing things happen. And my first experience was pretty amazing to me personally without the back pain.
Hmm.
Yeah. And oftentimes people will feel heat and they think you're using a heating pad, or they might feel subtle vibration. But traditional Reiki also, the hands are never touching the person. That's how I was taught. Most people learn it by hands directly on the person. So, in actuality, I don't think there's any right way. There's the way that resonates with you.
Now, I understand that some Reiki practitioners can actually uh, do their Reiki long distance. In other words, not even being in the same room with the person. Have you
Eh,
done that?
oh, yeah, that's the level two. You learn how to do that in level two, and you practice it in different ways. And the people that I have worked with have always reported back that they are aware of something
Hmm.
happening within their systems. It's really fun. Yeah.
So, after you got familiar with Reiki and became a practitioner, where did you go from there? What kind of modalities did you study?
Well, actually, I just learned the Reiki for myself. And then I taught for 15 years.
Wow.
And then um, I went to an alternative wellness fair in Madison, Wisconsin, and was introduced to biofeedback, quantum biofeedback. And when I sat down and was hooked up to the device, the woman that was running the quantum biofeedback device told me three things that she could not have possibly known about me. One was an emotion, one was a back issue, and one was an endocrine issue that took doctors 15 years to diagnose with me. And there they were, boom, boom, boom. And I was like, how do you know this? And she said, they're career opportunities. And my Reiki master teacher told me that I would continue to be hit by the cosmic 2x4 until I listened. And I had goosebumps all over my body, and I'm like, okay, Glenn, this must be it. I'm paying attention. And I was still teaching at the time, and I told myself that I would resign from my teaching positions if I had X amount of money in 6 months. And I said, okay, universe, if this is what I'm supposed to be doing, let it happen. And in 6 months, I had that set amount of money. I resigned, I took all my training, and so a new journey began. It was pretty remarkable. It was really easy. It's the first time in my life things just really flowed. There was no more pushing. It was just like this vortex of pulling energy. And that's how it's been since.
So you found your life mission, your path.
Yes. And it's still morphing. And I absolutely love what I do. I love what I am able to facilitate in shared space with others.
That's very nice. You're so lucky.
I am really lucky. I feel very, very blessed. I feel very, very blessed. But it requires a certain determination, you know? It's risk. It's a huge risk.
Why is it a risk?
I should rephrase that. I think other people view it as a huge risk. And I've never really viewed it as a huge risk, just kind of scary jumping into something in your own business where you're responsible for everything, including your education, your insurance, blah, 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 you know? And so it's against the norm, I would say.
And you're in a very small town.
Yes.
In Wisconsin.
Yes.
Which is very conservative. I know because I grew up there.
Yes.
I actually went to college in Oshkosh.
Okay.
And spent 4 or 5 years there. And that's where you're located. So I know it's very conservative. So I guess I'm wondering how you actually are able to attract clients, you know, and how do they come to you?
People find me. People find me. In the beginning, I joined a group called BNI, Business Networking International, and I did little talks at yoga studios and mainly the BNI though, and that got my name out a little bit more, and for people in that group that were having some issues, or family members were having issues, who were looking for something different, came to see me, and they were really happy. And so the referral process began, and it's really grown. So I have clients all over the country now.
That's nice. So you don't I should say, you don't just deal with what I call medical issues, like you go to a doctor for.
No.
You're more into the realm of wellness. Obviously, it's in your name. So what are some of the typical things that people would come to you for?
Oh my, unresolved pain, feeling stuck. Maybe it's an emotional piece that they just can't get through. I always tell my clients I'm not an MD. I don't diagnose. What I do is address their stress, their physical, their emotional, mental, and spiritual stress. And I typically start with biofeedback, and people will often say to me, "What is that thing, a lie detector test?" And I said, no, it's just your body revealing what it's ready to work on. And so we develop a rapport. Some people it takes a little bit longer, and some people they're just ready and they open. And then we can make progress.
You're talking about quantum biofeedback, and that's a machine. Could you describe that a little bit?
Yes, and in the industry, they don't like to use the word machine. It's a device, but it is a machine that's a device. And it's actually an FDA level 2 approved medical device. So that's nice. There's research behind it, and it's based in the quantum science fields of chemistry, biology, what have you. So, and there are measurements that have been correlated with different functions of the body, and their input into the device. And when a person is hooked up to the device, there's called, in the beginning, there is a signature gathering portion where over 11,000 stress reactants are tested 3 times at 1/100th of a second through galvanic skin response and voltammetric signatures. So that's how I get the data. And the piece of me that went through graduate school is very analytical, and a piece of me is extremely intuitive. And so the gift that I can bring is using both of those pieces, where they'll tell me what their major concerns are. And so I'm like a little detective. When I'm looking, I can input a stressor and then cross-correlate the reactants. And sometimes, more than 50%, I'll get a common denominator, and sometimes I don't. But there's usually a clue in that data, and I'll pose a question, and that's the core.
So it gives you a baseline from which to start.
Yes, it does. And I also generate, I have software that generates a 38-page report that is also approved by the FDA that I can send, and it has stress reactants. So it will have spine signatures. It will show each vertebrae in the spine and where the stress is, hormones, organs, endocrine system, heavy metals, emotions, allergens. And it's not an allergy test, but it will show foods sometimes that the person has just eaten, or definitely things that they have a pretty significant sensitivity to. Yeah, and so it helps people be proactive in their choices when they see that. Yeah.
Could you, to ground us a little bit more, could you give us an example of how you use this quantum biofeedback, maybe in a recent case or something that stands out in your mind?
Yeah, I can think of a case this week where a client came to see me. They were definitely feeling off. Told me that they were eating pretty well, pretty clean diet, organic, greens, not a lot of acid-forming foods. And when I looked at that report, the vitamins and mineral graphs were not within the normed wellness parameter at all. And so looking at that, along with initial scores called a VARHOPE, the V correlates to, there's voltage and amperage that correlate to the brain and digestion. And when the digestion's off, you're not absorbing anything, and it affects the upper endocrine. And this person was feeling pretty blah as well. So it really gives me a lot of insight as to maybe what support we can do that's in a substance. Then we can go to deeper levels. While they're starting to feel better in a physical way, we can delve into the other layers to support them that way as well.
So I understand you also do something with homeopathy. How does that work?
I do complex homeopathy. It's not traditional homeopathy. And the difference between traditional and complex homeopathy is that traditional homeopathy uses a single potency in the remedy. And if you use it too frequently or not enough, the efficacy is influenced. In complex homeopathy, you have multiple potencies in the same formula and maybe multiple remedies in the same formula, and the body will self-select exactly what it needs at the time the remedy is taken. So it's always perfect. It's very, very safe. It's super safe for infants, for elderly, and people who are very fragile with their health.
Do you have any examples of how this worked for somebody?
I've worked with homeopathy many, many times, and I guess there are a couple cases that stand out. One is with a woman who was on fertility drugs for 3 years, couldn't get pregnant, I did mud packing. I know I haven't talked about that, but I mud packed her scars, and then I supported her upper endocrine system, which regulates the lower endocrine system, with a product called Patui Liquid Tropic, which supports the pituitary and the hypothalamus. So in doing that, I didn't want to do any kind of herbs because she was trying to get pregnant. I don't want any potential risks, period. And she was pregnant in 3 weeks.
Wow.
She called me and she just was thrilled. It was so exciting, and she has a beautiful baby now. Yeah, so that was so rewarding, and just to hear her joy when she called me, I was like, it was a very joyful and emotional call to get that news. And I've also worked with people with shingles, and the homeopathy has helped greatly, along with a topical colloidal silver gel, so hand in hand, it's really reduced the length of time that people have had to be in that condition.
Yeah, I understand. That's very painful.
Yeah.
You mentioned mud packs. What about mud packs? How does that work?
Mud packs. I learned about mud packing from Dr. Bob Marshall, who's the owner of Premier Research Labs. He's a PhD in biochemistry, and he is a seeker of optimal health. And this mud packing procedure, mud packs have been in our history for a long, long time, going back to the Trojan Wars. The warriors would go and put little straw, like grass straw reeds in their nostrils and bury themselves in mud after battle to remove the sedations of the injuries to their tissue. So the research goes back a long, long time. And the mud packs are used to remove, they're called sedations from injuries on the body. So that can be a surgical injury, it can be an impact from like a car accident or a sport or a fight, possibly. It could be a cut. It could be even a little tiny scar here on your chin or a piercing. And so when the scars or the traumas are on a meridian line in the body, over time they'll travel along the meridian line, and they have the potentiality of sedating an organ or a gland. Or they can reflex and cause pain in certain parts of the body. So a few months ago, I had a 16-year-old teenage girl that when she was little, she had a scar right here on her forehead. She plays baseball or softball. The baseball or softball hit her front teeth, and she had migraines in this part of her head, but they were getting worse. First time I saw her, I said, well, I would really like to mud pack you. I know that would help you a lot, but it will involve putting some mud on your teeth and your hair right here in your forehead. Are you okay with that? And she was like, please, anything. And she had a migraine when she came in, and it was about 90% gone when she left the office. I did a little cranial work too, but the mud pack itself just took away the sedation. And when I say sedation, it's kind of like this impulse, like an energetic beacon. And it just, so over time, wherever it's hitting stays strong, but then it just kind of crumples. And so let's say there's a thyroid issue and there's been some kind of sedation going on along the meridian line. You can feed that gland nutrients, but you'll have to continue feeding it nutrients until you remove the sedation. And sometimes it takes a long time to recover because it's been there so long, but if you can catch it and then feed it nutrients, it can come back online. It's remarkable. It's absolutely remarkable, and it's so fun. And you can trace where the energy from the trauma is going in the body. And yeah, so mud packing is remarkable, and that's a pretty cool case.
Yeah, I never heard of that.
Most people have never heard of it.
I've heard of mud packs, like from the Dead Sea and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Women put them on their face and whatnot. But
Right.
this sounds totally different.
This is a special combination of earth elements formulated as mud, but it has like 50 different ingredients in the mud. And there are a couple different kinds of mud, and you do kinesiology muscle testing to determine which mud to use and then which activating fluid to use. So if you're mud packing the teeth, a lot of people have trauma to their teeth, and every single tooth in your mouth correlates to an organ or gland in the body. So I've mud packed teeth. You can only do 2 at a time. And I have had people break out in hives, but it's getting rid of toxins. And then whatever's happening in their teeth, they don't have the intensity of whatever they were feeling.
What about those wisdom teeth that everybody has out?
Yeah,
That's
they
a-
still need mud pack.
That's
They
a
still need mud
major traumatic surgery. I know 2
is.
people that had this done in the last week.
Really?
Yeah, young women, yeah.
Oh,
And they suffered greatly because they didn't take any precautions, no vitamin C, no nothing. You do other things as well. Have we talked about quantum reflex analysis?
that's how I test the mud packing. And no, quantum reflex analysis is a muscle testing or kinesiology way of discerning wellness in the physical body. And what I love about quantum reflex analysis versus, your arm out and things going in and out of your field is that the client wears a little apron either around their waist or on their arm, and they use their 2 fingers. So I use the dominant hand. It's called a bidigital O-ring, and it was developed by an MD, and it actually has a patent on it.
Really?
And yeah, it does, really. And with a yes, the fingers stay closed, and if it's no, you test. It's called testing off. And so the client will use these 2 fingers, and there's like 30 points on the body that we test. And I begin with the front dantian point, and that's between the top of the pubic bone and the navel. So they'll put 2 fingers right on there, not on metal, and we find the lock first. And almost always, if that point tests off, so we test it, and then you stress tap it 1, 2, 3, 4. So when you're under stress, you want the points to stay strong as well. Most people test off with a stress tap, and that means typically they're imprinted by electromagnetic frequencies that can come from your cell phone, all of your electronic gadgets like your computer, iPads, a Wi-Fi roaming through your building, wherever you are. Stoplights even can throw that point off.
Wow.
Yeah.
So should we all move into the countryside?
People are happier in nature, but there are ways to address it, and it's called Vastu Bioenergetics. You can get little Q discs for your phone. There are all sorts of gadgets, and including, and I know we haven't talked about this is a spray called radiation care, and for some people that does it as well. So, but when I do the quantum reflex analysis, I go through points. So I start with that front point. I check the kidneys, brain points, following down to parathyroid, thyroid, thymus, the stomach, large and small intestine, liver, gallbladder, pancreas, spleen, reproductive organs, bladder, circulation, lymph. I may have missed a few, but the crucial one too for most people who have sleep problems. The deep sleep point is located right behind the ear. You press into your mastoid bone. That point ends at the gallbladder meridian. So the gallbladder meridian ends right at that point. And so if they're not sleeping, oftentimes people just need a gallbladder support, which means they usually need digestive support. But if it's on the right side, it's the gallbladder. If it's on the left side, it's hormonal, and it's typically melatonin. So it's really fascinating. I love doing that work. And so I get these guys in that are like super strong, and they test off, and they're like, "You're pulling harder." And I said, "No, I'm not. Do you really think that I could pull your fingers apart like that? I don't think so." Yeah.
Big weightlifter.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. And so then I can support them with products, and not always. I had one woman come in, and a really close dear friend of hers had lymphoma, and she was grieving, and we carry grief in our lungs, in the lung points. So I didn't mention the lung points, and then their eye and sinus points too, but her lung points tested off, and it didn't make any sense. And so the logical piece of me says, okay, let's try this lungs formula, and they didn't work. And I did biofeedback first in crystal crystalline energy came up, and I have this little dish of crystals in my office, and I said, why don't you just pick one of these out? And she held a little tiny crystal in her hand. We tested the lung points, and she was solid as a rock. I said, you take that home with you. It will help support your grief. And you need to honor that place. And so then that led into a processing session for the grief for her. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. You have to really think outside the box. So you have your traditional baseline training,
right,
but that doesn't always work.
Yeah, you have to ask yourself, I'm asking myself, how many doctors really do that or have the time or take the time, when you're part of a big HMO. It's a factory, you go in, oh, what's wrong? You give you a drug, goodbye.
And it's really unfortunate because they want to do so much more. I really believe that, but they're required to follow the protocol that is before that, is stated. And if they don't follow protocol, they risk losing
they're out.
Their jobs. Yeah, absolutely.
Craniosacral and Somato emotional release. What is that?
So craniosacral therapy is a way of listening to the body. It's typically it is a light touch, but sometimes the body might pull the practitioner's hand in deeper for some kind of visceral release in the tissue. But it's a very light touch, and you listen with your hands to the rhythm. And the craniosacral rhythm is likened to respiratory, your breathing or your heart rate. But your breathing and your heart rate can change given what you're doing. So when you're sleeping, it's really quiet, and when you're exercising, it's fast, right? The cranial rhythm is stationary. It doesn't change. The only time it changes is over age. So babies' rates are a little bit faster than somebody who's elderly, and somebody who's in a coma, depending on how it happened. If it's from a trauma, it's slow. If it's a drug-induced coma, it's fast. But so you listen for this rhythm, and the advanced training, you learn how to feel. They're called energy vectors in a body. So when I first start with a client, they tell me what's going on, maybe not, and they usually forget something. And I'll place my hands on their shins just lightly, and I can feel instantly if they have something going on in their knee or their hip, because it's like a swoosh feeling of energy. And so the cranial work works with the soft tissue, typically in the body. And sometimes the soft tissue is imprinted physically, and sometimes that holding pattern is also influenced by the emotional response that correlates with how that injury happened. That's the somato portion of it. So an example that I can give you, and this kind of combined modalities, but I started with this a male, 40 years old. When he turned 40, in his mind, he thought he was going to die. When he turned 40, he had excruciating back pain. Went to physical therapy, had cortisone injections, saw a chiropractor. Nothing was helping him. And he heard about me, and he lived in Racine, which is about 2 hours away, and came to see me. Mm-hmm. So I did biofeedback with him first, and I didn't really see anything with his back, but drowning was in the first, right on my screen. And I said, did you ever have a near drowning experience, or did anyone close to you ever drown? He said, no. So then when we were doing cranial, when the body is processing something, it becomes absolutely still. And he became still. And I said, what are you thinking? He said, I'm in the water. I said, where are you? He said, I'm in California. I said, what's happening? I'm being pulled out by the riptide. I said, how old are you? I'm 23. And he forgot about it. He's 40, but the fear of death got trapped in his lumbar spine, the lower part of his back. And how the session progressed is that we released the fear of the pattern that was put in place, because the body doesn't keep track of time. So he said, okay, you're not 23 anymore. Thank you for keeping me strong so I could keep my head above water, but now let's let this holding pattern go so my tissue can relax.
I see.
And his back pain went away. His back pain completely left him.
So in a way, his pain represented that being stuck in time back when he was 23.
Well, the fear of death. Yeah, the fear of death, which was triggered.
Yeah, locked it in.
It locked it in, absolutely. Yeah.
It's almost like doing a past life regression.
In a way. And sometimes that surfaces as well. People will remember things that they had no conscious thought of in those sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they might even feel another person in their energy field. And that happened another time too. I worked with a police officer for a while, and she came in and she was just not herself. She got on the table, and when I got to, it's a thoracic release right here. And when I got to that portion, I'm like, I just had this knowingness that she was around somebody who recently died. And I just asked her, I said, were you around somebody that recently died? And she said, yes, I was the first on a suicide scene this morning. And I said, oh,
Wow.
well, you need to tell this person that they can't be in your body. It's not their body, it's your body. And you need to tell them to go to the light right now.
Wow.
And it was like, had this grip on her throat. There was no movement.
Wow.
And so she just was like, boom, I'm doing this. And as soon as she did that, then the flow comes back. So it's really, you listen with your hands, and when the hands flow, the blockage is removed. And I felt the flow. I said, okay, how do you feel? She's like, oh my gosh. And she was back to herself. That was pretty remarkable too.
That is amazing. You're really a multi-dimensional healer. It's pretty incredible that mid-eastern Wisconsin has somebody like you.
I never thought I would land here, but I have grown to like where I am, and I have found some beautiful, beautiful people here that are very awake.
There's one thing I forgot I wanted to bring up, and maybe you want to talk about it. You mentioned recently in a phone call that you were working with some people from the Netherlands. And I don't know anything about that. What is it called, and what's it good for? What do they do?
Okay. I have a beautiful friend and colleague. Her name is Johanna, and another beautiful friend and colleague, Elaine, from England, and they work together. Johanna she's the owner of a company called Healing Arts. And Healing Arts kind of is the umbrella for practitioners, as well as using they're called liquid light frequencies that she has created. She started out thinking she was going to make a flower essence, and that's not what happened. As she was evolving her process, sound, toning, energy, geometries were very present, and she's very she has very heightened sensitivities and gifts. And so she sees color, she hears and produces sound, she can see geometries, she can see, it's not channeling, she works with different, I'm going to say light beings, but that could be Saint Germain, Archangel Michael, Mary Magdalene, Christ consciousness, all of that. And so these frequencies are made and produced, and each one has a different quality to help repair tears in our multidimensional field. And the healing that takes place with these when people use them goes way beyond their consciousness.
You mean their local consciousness?
They don't even realize what it's all doing. I guess on a practical level, that I had a client recently who was diagnosed with nose cancer, and we found there are almost 200 different frequencies now, but two of them correlated to assisting the nose cancer. And she ordered 2 bottles and she went through them, and this was prior to her surgery just in January. And when they went in to remove the cancer, there was none. It was gone.
Poof.
It was completely gone, where the biopsy in October revealed cancer cells. Yeah, so that was one.
Pretty cool.
And I wrote something else down, Steve. I worked recently with a woman in her 60s, and it was the first time we met. I had no experience with her before, but she revealed afterward. She didn't want to reveal much, and so we worked with a frequency, just one, and it's like her heart opened. And she told me afterwards, she said, Kari, something happened to me 20 years ago, and I have not healed from it, and I know it's blocked me. I've tried to move through it, but it's like this big wall. And she said, whatever just happened, it just dissolved. And it was life-changing for her. It was life-changing. So
Did she know what it was?
she knew what the trauma was, but she didn't reveal it. And that's
Oh.
okay. She didn't need to reveal it to me.
Okay.
Didn't matter.
I think we've covered a lot of ground here today. And I just want to say, you're a delightful person. I think anyone would feel the joy of and the healing that comes from you, just your general attitude, no matter what modality that you choose to work with or find to be profitable for that person. I think anyone would do well to contact you if they have any kind of issue at all, just to see if there's something that can be done, especially things that are not what we call ordinary.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate
So
that.
Wisconsin is very lucky to have you.
Well, thank you. That's humbling, and I feel grateful that I'm able to that I was able to step into this knowingness, and then B, have the courage to establish a business here of all places. And I don't want to be negative at all, but I think it's easier in other parts of the world, country. It's a blessing. It's a blessing, and I'm always grateful to work with the people who step through my door. And it's mutual, and it's not about being a healer. I don't use those words. It's about holding space. It's being the space with somebody else and listening in all ways to support their evolution. And it's so interesting because as they heal, there's always a portion in the facilitator that's benefited as well. It's a mutual blessing, but it comes down to listening and holding space.
Well said.
All
Well, thank
right.
you, Kari Uselman of Wellness Essentials.